国际广播电台。
中国国际广播电台。
Cina Radio Internazia, parolas en Pechino.
Of economic recovery and moved faster to foster. The meeting called for efforts to raise the awareness of risks and maintain confidence in the country's development. Officials say China has recorded an average annual foreign trade increase of nearly 1.6 trillion yuan and is almost equal to the total trade volume of a medium-sized country for a year. The General Administration of Customs also says China has led the world in terms of total trade volume of goods for 7 consecutive years. Beijing will host a high-level meeting on China-Africa cooperation in just over a month. The 2024 Beijing Summit of the Forum on China-Africa cooperation will run from September 4th to the 6th. The summit will focus on joint efforts to promote modernization and build a high-level China-Africa community with a shared future. The Chinese Finance Ministry says the country has allocated over 230 million yuan or $33 million to assist in disaster relief and agricultural production restoration in 5 flood-stricken provincial-level regions. The money will be used to manage flood-damaged crops, restore damaged agricultural facilities, support flood control and drainage of fields. Local authorities have confirmed that at least 7 people were dead and 3 others remain missing after rain triggered flash floods and mud flows in Hunan province. The dead include 3 villagers from Yongxing County in the central Chinese province. They were killed by a mud flow while patrolling in the mountains last week. The other 4 deaths were reported in 4 villages in the city of Zixing. Efforts to seal the dike breaches in the Jiangxi River in Hunan province are underway. Zhu Luoman has more.
3 major dike breaches here in Xiangtan City in Hunan province. One of them is in Yifu Town, where the gap extends for about 79 meters. A preliminary plan on how to seal the dike breach came out. The second dike breach that we have was at Huaxu Town, where there was a 10-meter dike breach. It has been completely sealed right now, and the residual water has been discharged. The third dike that we currently have is at Hekou Town. This one extends at about 30 meters. Local residents have already been evacuated.
A series of regulations aimed at protecting internet users from cyberspace violence will take effect in China on Thursday. Internet information service providers are required to offer users the option to only receive private messages from friends or to reject all private messages. The move is aimed at fending off illegal or harmful online content targeting individuals such as insults, rumors, defamation, and discrimination. The providers are also required to provide functions to assist users in safeguarding their rights. Multiple landslides amid heavy rains in southern India have killed 66 people and injured 70 others. At least 3 massive landslides struck Kerala state. Rescue operations are underway. Media reports say many people thought to have been washed away in the Chalea River. The Prime Minister's office has announced compensation of over $2,300 for the family of each deceased person. Venezuela has urged Argentina, Chile, Costa Rica, Peru, Panama, the Dominican Republic, and Uruguay to withdraw their diplomatic staff in the country. The measure also calls for withdrawing Venezuelan diplomatic staff in those nations. Venezuela has accused the government of those 7 countries of interference in its internal affairs, especially the presidential elections that saw President Nicolas Maduro's re-election to a third 6-year term. China Media Group has hosted an event on cultural exchanges in the Spanish capital. Participants discussed issues such as China's efforts to further deepen reforms and development opportunities related to the country's modernization. The event also saw the launch of 10 CMG programs on China's development and Sino-Spanish cooperation. And that's the news. I'm Salute.
Analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Welcome to World Today. I'm Dean in Beijing. Coming up, China and Italy agreed to boost their economic ties following a top leaders meeting. The United States is moving to boost alliances with the Philippines with military funding and a pact. Venezuela is recalling diplomats and ambassadors from 7 countries in the region that refuse to recognize the re-election of President Nicolas Maduro. And the new UK government is setting out plans for spending cuts in order to plug holes in terms of the public finances. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, download our podcast by searching World Today. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called on China and Italy to promote the Silk Road spirit and prosperous relations to go steady. The senior Chinese leader made the remark in a Monday meeting with visiting Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in Beijing. Xi Jinping said China and Italy are the two ends of the ancient Silk Road, suggesting that the Silk Road spirit regarding peace, cooperation, openness, inclusiveness, mutual learning, and mutual benefit is a shared treasure of both China and Italy. President Xi Jinping has also reaffirmed Beijing's commitment towards developing ties with Italy. And for her part, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said Italy attaches great importance to China's international role in the city, and Italy is willing to foster a closer and high-level partnership with China. China and Italy have issued a 3-year action plan regarding strengthening their comprehensive strategic partnership. So joining us now on the line is Dr. George Zagopoulos, Director of the EU-China program with CISE, a European research organization. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, George, what do you think is the realistically speaking meaning of emphasizing the spirit of the ancient Silk Road for the existing relationship between China and Italy?
Well, every reference to the Silk Road or the Belt and Road Initiative, in my opinion, is relevant to cooperation. So this is what perhaps President Xi Jinping means when he refers to that. And obviously, when the discussion revolves around the ancient Silk Road, history plays a vital role, but also current business activities are of equal significance. So an all-round collaboration is at the epicenter of attention, and this is what China and Italy are attempting to achieve, despite some disagreement with the mood has been positive and encouraging about future developments.
So how would you look at Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's trip to China this time around? For example, Meloni has vowed to relaunch cooperation with China. She laid this message in her meetings with several top Chinese officials. Why do you think, say, from Italy's perspective, for example, there is a need for relaunch?
Well, I do not know if relaunch is the best term to describe the partnership, because generally speaking, Sino-Italian relations have been positive throughout the year. Perhaps the main reason why Prime Minister Meloni decided to use this term is because by the end of 2023, she decided not to renew the Memorandum of Understanding on jointly building the Belt and Road Initiative. But beyond this, I would say that Italy and China are now making steps in seeing what they could achieve together, not only in the area of business, trade, and culture, but also in other issues relevant to international politics and conflicts which are persisting in the world. So, taking into account that Prime Minister Meloni made a visit to China, it is indicative that she is really interested in keeping the relationship warm and in achieving additional results from this partnership.
So here are some basic facts regarding the ties between China and Italy, especially in the economic sense. China is Italy's second biggest non-EU trading partner. More than 1,600 Italian companies are active in terms of their investment in China or operation in China, especially in industries like textiles, mechanical engineering, pharmaceuticals, energy, and heavy industries, you name it. So with that in mind, Dr. George Zagopoulos, what do you make of this particular 3-year action plan, including an industrial collaboration memorandum that Beijing and Rome have signed this time?
Well, to start with, we should say that Italy is the third biggest economy in the Eurozone. So this itself makes it evident that for a strong European economy, the Chinese market is highly significant. So for the Italian economy to rely on exports and to send its products to other markets, the role of the Chinese market is obviously important. But beyond these, synergies in the business sector, both in China and in Italy, are also vital for the Italian government, which is aiming at boosting its own economic activities. So the new action plan that was signed, I believe, will lay some important groundwork in order for the two countries and companies of the two countries to do business together in different sectors. And these different sectors can include tourism, energy, even electric vehicles and other fields which are currently at the epicenter of international attention. So once again, what has been stressed here is the importance of connectivity and the importance of collaboration in economic activity.
So the Italian government is actually currently holding talks with some Chinese automakers as part of a bigger government-led effort, I guess, to attract another major automaker to Italy, to invest in Italy, in addition to Stellantis. In May, Stellantis, which of course includes Italy's Fiat, announced a joint venture with Chinese EV startup Leap Motor to begin selling electric vehicles in Europe. What do you think is the role that Italy can play in terms of enhancing auto industry cooperation, including seeking solutions, seeking ways to resolve the current, let's say, trade frictions over the EV industry between China and the European Union?
Well, yes, this is a very important question. Trade frictions are existing indeed, but at the same time, I believe that there is no one in Europe, including in Italy, who cannot acknowledge the success of China's industry in producing electric cars. So having said that, it is important for the industry in Europe and the industry in Italy to see why the Chinese industry has been successful, and in that regard attempt to benefit in terms of also producing and creating partnerships and consortia that will benefit the European market itself. So potential agreements can include, for example, either the joint skills to sell cars themselves, or even production factories in both Europe and in China. So trade frictions are existing, but at the same time, the success of the Chinese industry itself is self-evident, and that is what is leading the Italian car makers to take into account the Chinese experience.
In the meantime, Prime Minister Meloni's China trip this time around has also seen her discuss and talk about some of the international hotspot issues, including the wars in Ukraine and the war in Gaza with Chinese leaders. He has said on record that, quote, China is inevitably a very important interlocutor to address all these dynamics, unquote. So what do you think is the common grounds between China and Italy when we talk about, say, the war in Ukraine or the war in Gaza?
Well, the achievement of peace and stability in the world are in the interest of both China and Italy, of both China and the European Union, if I could say. And noting that China is the second biggest economy in the world and a very powerful country with a seat in the permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations, it is telling itself. So recently, China hosted a delegation from Ukraine, including the foreign minister of Ukraine, Dmitry Kuleba. China also mediated in order for 14 Palestinian to overcome their differences and possibly build a temporary unity government. So all this is indicative of the role that China can play in world politics. And I didn't even refer to the agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So the bigger China becomes, the more important its international responsibilities are becoming. And this is what Italy itself is certainly acknowledging, obviously, by looking at the conflicts in the Middle East and in Ukraine.
So the final question before we let you go briefly, George. Does Italy have to choose between China and the United States? We know the United States is a close partner of Italy.
Well, obviously, the United States is a close partner of Italy and of other European countries, but at the same time, the strategic autonomy concept needs to be analyzed and developed. This is a vision which has been developed by President Emmanuel Macron, and many European countries are interested in seeing the European Union play a role in the international system that will make it more and more powerful. And in that regard, obviously, collaboration with China, despite this agreement, is significant.
Thank you very much for joining us. That was Dr. George Zagopoulos, Director of EU-China Program with CIFE, a European Research Organization. You're listening to World Today. We'll be back.
Hello, my name is Alessandro Colombier Teixeira. I'm a professor of public policy and management at Tsinghua University in Beijing. I am a great listener of the World Today. In my opinion, the World Today is one of the best China radio programs. In the World Today, we can get the best news and analysis in what is happening now in the world. So please, come to join us.
You are listening to World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. The U.S. has announced $5 million in new military funding to the Philippines. The announcement came as Washington's top defense official and top diplomatic official held talks in Manila on Tuesday. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. before holding talks with their Philippine counterparts. The $500 million would include funding for various Philippine Navy equipment. Philippine officials are even claiming that U.S. military funding may even double next year depending on the actual situation. So joining us now on the line is Herman Lauro, President of Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute. Herman, thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, good evening.
So, talking more specifically about this $500 million that has been announced by Anthony Blinken, more specifically, we know about $125 million out of these $500 million will be used specifically for the construction and other kinds of, say, upgrades or improvement in areas within the Philippine military bases, which will be occupied by American forces under a 2014 defense cooperation deal between Washington and Manila. So, in general, how would you look at this new funding announced here?
Well, this is a very big swindle by the Americans of their so-called allies, the Philippines, because they're getting their bases rent-free. We are paying for the water and electricity and they announced in a very big way this so-called 500 million, which is divided into 5 years, with the first tranche a little bit more than 100, and going to needs not of the Filipinos and not of the Philippines, but of Americans. These are going to be facilities that they will use for their...
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Yeah. Yeah. Continue with your point.
Hello?
Yeah. Hi, Herman.
We're disconnected.
Well, it seems currently we have some connection problem with our guest. We will try to reach him once again. So currently we're talking about a $400 million connection for funding that the United States has announced for the Philippine side. Hello, Herman. Are we having you back?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, continue with your point.
Yeah, where was I when I was cut? I was saying that this is not going to be serving any real need of the Filipinos. So it is a big swindle from my point of view, and many people can see through the swindle. What the Philippines need is economic opportunities, economic development, economic growth, but the United States continues to refuse to sign a free trade agreement with the Philippines. So what kind of friend and ally is the United States to the Philippines, as we can see from this evident inability to really help the Philippines where it is needed by the Philippines.
Yeah, so there are actually voices in Philippines or elsewhere that seek to justify the new funding from the United States. Some people say, for example, the Philippines needs to modernize its armed forces because the armed forces of the Philippines are one of the weakest in Asia. How would you respond to those opinions?
Well, the Philippines is not only one of the weakest in military terms, but it is one of the weakest in economic terms. Its GDP per capita is below Indonesia, below Malaysia, and syempre, of course, below Thailand. So what is there to say except that these priorities, giving the importance to the military requirements, distorted priority. 95% of the Filipino population in the latest surveys, such as Pulse Asia, have expressed that desire for the government to focus on economic development, prices, inflation, and all these things. And only 5% is concerned with the territorial disputes, territorial threats, perceived territorial threats, and so on. So the modernization of the armed forces of the Philippines should start with the modernization and strengthening of the economy so that it can produce whatever the military can require of it. Arms, for example, we are just an importer of arms. We don't have a steel industry to speak of. We just get second-hand donations from the United States, South Korea, Japan for our naval ships and for our Coast Guard ships. What kind of modernization is that going to be? The Philippines has been able to buy some BrahMos missiles, anti-ship missiles, but it does not have the satellite monitoring to make these purchases effective. This is just a gimmick of some of the military purchasers for commissions. So this is absolutely the distorted priority.
So whenever some Western media outlets, cover the military alliance between Washington and Manila, they tend to point to China and the South China Sea disputes between China and the Philippines. Now, actually, last week we understand the Philippine side and the Chinese side reached a temporary arrangement. Let's put it in this way, on the Renaijiao issue. Under this arrangement, for the first time in more than a year or so, no confrontation was reported when the Philippine side tried to transport supplies to this, grounded ship over there in the Renaijiao. So, are there signs that someone or some countries are attempting to torpedo this temporary arrangement between China and the Philippines?
Well, actually, I just written a press statement here for a newspaper asking for our think tank's view. And I said actually the visit of Blinken and because it is coming at a time when the Philippines just rejected the 1.5 years campaign of the Americans through their U.S. Naval Research or Intelligence Group, imposing the assertive transparency strategy of tension, using the Philippine Coast Guard, using the Philippine Navy, and so on. So this deal that you have just mentioned between China and the Philippines, trying to de-escalate and ease tensions, is a rejection of the American the strategy of tension that has prevailed over the past 1.5 years. You were asking about the duration. Well, it has been exactly 1.5 years. The de-escalation has been attempted once before. This was introduced by President Bongbong Marcos to the idea to President Xi Jinping in November 2023 at the San Francisco ASEAN Summit on the sidelines, and that was processed through to the 8th bilateral Philippines consultative meeting. And there was an initial de-escalation on February 1 when there was a flawless delivery also to the BRP Sierra Madre, the grounded ship at the Renai Jau or Ayungin Mission. But that was again aborted by the Americans using their U.S. proxies here in the Philippine Coast Guard. But the pressure from the Department of Foreign Affairs and the other more rational and reasonable elements in our government prevailed eventually after the June 27 clash of the Chinese Coast Guard and the Philippine Navy. The de-escalation number 2, I call, was initiated and led to the talks with China again, and now we have the second de-escalation, easing tensions, which I will repeat is a rejection of the American imposition to keep tensions high in the South Chinese. So this is a failure of the American strategy and a victory of the Philippines, China, and ASEAN
I take your point.
approach.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the final question before we let you go, Herman.
Yes.
We understand Washington has already, started sending a kind of message to the Manila side that, U.S. support to the Philippines will remain the same, will not change, regardless of who will become the next U.S. president. How does this message sound to you?
Well, I think there is a deeper core in U.S. Politics that is in control over and above the presidents of the United States. As we can see, I'm not even sure there will not be a second attempt on the life of candidate Trump. We can say that for sure. But it is not up to the United States to change this situation. It is up to the Philippines, China, and ASEAN to stop the interference of America in the region that we call our home. So we are going to do our best here in the Philippines to reject the Americans. In fact, the slogan we have in our protest rallies to meet Blinken and Austin is Blinken, Austin, get out, stay out. So we're trying to get them out, including the U.S. bases. We're filing a case in the Supreme Court, Philippine Supreme Court very soon to reject the U.S. bases. So we'll be working hard to get the Americans out of Asia and the Philippines.
Thank you very much for joining us today. That's Herman Laurel, President of Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute, joining us from Manila. You're listening to World Today. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, download our podcast by searching World Today. I'm Dihan in Beijing. We'll be back after a short break.
economist of Hang Seng Bank, China. The World Today is a real fun program. You will hear interesting people discussing global trends, economic events, what's happening in and outside of China. So, friends around the world, hope you can join us.
Welcome. I'm economics professor and member of the Data Science and AI Center at New York University. On the World Today program, you can find in-depth and impartial insight, as well as critical commentary on key trends in the Chinese economy, technology, business, and blockchain. To prepare for the world tomorrow, join me on World Today. We are back with World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. China's Customs Authority has rebuked a narrative about overcapacity in the country's green energy sector. A senior official with the General Administration of Customs said on Tuesday that China has enriched its global supply of green energy, noting the overcapacity narrative is inconsistent with the rules of market economy. Accusations regarding overcapacity in China's electric vehicle, solar panel, and wind turbine industries are at the center of China's recent trade frictions with both the United States and the European Union. So joining us now on the line is Professor Liu Baochen, Director of the Center for International Business Ethics with the University of International Business and Economics. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
So more specifically, Professor Liu, let's take a look at some specific data provided by China's Customs Authority on Tuesday. It's estimated that global EV sales by units, measured by units, will hit 45 million by the year 2030, and that level will be representing some 3 times of the global sales and 5 times the sales here in the Chinese market last year. So do you think these figures would constitute a convincing piece of evidence that there is no overcapacity in China?
Well, the overcapacity definition is pretty much put into question. So what is really the benchmark to measure whether it's a lower capacity or excessive capacity? So I think in an objective view is the market demand. So even if you produce one car which doesn't really enjoy any purchase, then that's a redundant capacity or excessive capacity. But if you make the millions of cars which are in hot demand, then that's a shortage of supply even. So therefore, the accusation of the excessive capacity for e-vehicles are pointless in that, as you have mentioned, the customs reveals that the renewable energy as a whole, inclusive of renewable batteries, solar panels, the e-vehicles, etc., they're the pace setter. It's just that China is now taking the boss of the whole global market share, and that was really sounds spooky to the competitors. Now it comes to another issue, which is the level playing field of competition. So whether there's a fair competition or not. So both the WTO rules and many other international economic and trade agreements, they are really against artificially manipulated capacity. So this is really the point of contention between China and the United States. So they are targeting the subsidies behind the capacity that China does enjoy the privilege. However, if you look at the EU and the United States, they are actually stepping up in their own subsidies to identify programs and industries. So now, the fact that we have really these lion's share in the global marketplace is pretty much a backlash from the competitors which enjoy a disadvantage as a matter of fact. So this is really the core issue. It turned out to be more of a political issue than a business issue, not to mention market economic mechanisms that's at work.
So in other words, you would agree with this point that talking about the so-called or the alleged overcapacity in some of renewable energy sector is very much inconsistent with the rules of market economy.
Well, I'm talking on both sides. If the capacity is artificially manipulated against the WTO rules, for example, in exemplifying the production capacity, so that's something that the rules does not permit. But if you support education, human capacity building, and the professional training, for research and development, and also support the ecosystem by providing more of the social security for the workers and by protecting more of the environment, and that's not only permissible but also encouraged by global rules. So it's a matter of how subsidy is being allocated.
Your point well taken. So the final question before we let you go, we still have about 2 minutes before we need to wrap up, Professor. So in a bigger picture sense, do you think the highlight that has been witnessed in China's exports of all those EVs, solar panels in most of recent years are a reflection of the green transition in China's overall foreign trade? Why or why not?
I think definitely because China is really going for two major transformations, and also China is making a big painstaking effort towards that. One is the green transition, because we are highly committed with the carbon peaking and carbon neutrality, which is a responsibility not only for the Chinese people, but also for the world in addressing the climate change issue. The other is high quality development. We need to reduce more of the labor intensity and also those the costly businesses, and provide more added value for our exports. Well, that's why more of the labor-intensive operations are being more reallocated to some of the lower income countries. So we are now finding it's a really uphill battle in terms of elevating our structure in the global supply chain, and that really is shaking the global division of labor, and that's taking the world and also the competition and more as a surprise. So talking about the overcapacity, actually China had excessive capacity in garments, in restaurants, in hospitality industry, etc. But the market can really be able to solve them. If they do not really see a business or market, they will directly do out of their investment and divest into other industries which enjoy.
That was Professor Wu Dongchen, Director of the Center for International Business Ethics with the University of International Business and Economics. You are listening to World Today. We'll be back. You are listening to World Today. I'm Dinhan in Beijing. Venezuela is recalling its diplomats from 7 countries that refused to recognize the re-election of President Nicolas Maduro. The Venezuelan Foreign Ministry has criticized Argentina, the Dominican Republic, Panama, Peru, Uruguay, and Chile for attempting to interfere in Venezuela's elections. Maduro on Monday denounced the far-right efforts to destabilize this country, accusing them of employing some paid criminal gang groups to incite violence. His government has vowed to resist any activities that would threaten peaceful coexistence. So joining us now on the line is Professor Jiang Shixue from College of International Relations, Sichuan International Studies University. So thank you very much for joining us today, Professor Jiang Shixue. Now, first of all, in your observation, are we basically seeing a repetition of the occurrences after Venezuela's 2019 election?
Yes, the simple answer is yes. Last time we also saw lots of turmoil and unrest. And this time we are very sorry to see that the political situation is starting to get worse and worse. I hope everything will be fine in the near future.
So with regard to these 7 regional countries from which Venezuela is recalling its ambassadors and diplomatic staff, what do you think they have in common?
Well, one thing in common is that these countries just wish to support the free project, the democratic thing that is there. But it's not strange to see that Argentina criticized Maduro for this kind of election, but also there are some kind of left leaders. Look at Chile. People tend to believe that Chile is governed by a kind of a left-wing politician. So I don't know why this time both the right-wing and the left-wing all say something which is critical to the elections in Venezuela. That means this continent is really deeply divided.
So I guess with that in mind, or considering its already deep division in that region, I guess the Venezuela election this time is further solidifying that kind of division. So in the meantime, we understand Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia are actually some of the important regional players that have better relations with the Venezuelan government or with the Maduro government than the previously mentioned regional countries. They say they want to see a complete publication of the election results in Venezuela. So what do you make of their position, their stance?
Yes, you're right. These 3 countries are very important. But well, I believe that their best wish is to see that this kind of election is transparent. But for the time being, no one knows the fact whether or not this election is transparent or fair. Because the critics, the opposition, always say something negative about the Maduro. So I hope that the government in Venezuela will show facts, will show the results to everybody in the world, so that they can see that this election is legitimate, to be transparent, to be fair.
The Biden administration has been talking about so-called concern about the Venezuelan election, but in the meantime, the Biden administration has not for additional economic sanctions against Venezuela. So what do you think is the current calculation on the part of the Biden administration?
Well, I think the U.S. is quite quick to make some kind of response to the election. Secretary of State Blinken has already said that this kind of election is fraudulent. So it calls on Maduro to allow the recounting of the vote. So we are going to see the next step. What kind of step that the U.S. needs to take. Personally, I believe, first of all, the U.S. will stop its negotiation with Maduro. Secondly, probably the U.S. will definitely put on more pressure or even economic sanctions
against Venezuela. But the one thing we have to mention is about the coming election. I believe that if Trump is coming to power, then I think that the U.S.-Venezuela relationship will get worse and worse.
Can you elaborate more in that regard? Why a possible or a potential Trump re-election in Washington, D.C. would further deteriorate, will make the relationship between the two sides further deteriorate?
Well, don't forget that Trump once asked his foreign policy advisor, saying that can we send the troops to Venezuela? So how could the Trump ask such kind of question? So based on this question, we can believe that Trump will take a very tough stand against Maduro in the near future, if Trump can come into the White House again.
So how much efforts will be needed for President Maduro to maintain, say, domestic stability, peace, and order after the election?
Well, this is a $1 million question. You know, over the past 1 decade or so, Venezuela has been suffering from 4 crises: political crisis, economic crisis, foreign policy crisis, and the social crisis. Okay, so these 4 crises has dealt a heavy blow to the economy of Venezuela. So in order to get out of these 4 crises, I think first of all, the U.S. and other kinds of external forces should stop interference in the domestic affairs of Venezuela. And secondly, there should be a genuine political dialogue between Maduro and his opposition. Without this kind of political dialogue, well, Venezuela will keep on walking on this terrible road with the 4 crises. But very, very pessimistic to see that the future is not so bright.
So why do you think for the outside powers to stop intervention or interference in Venezuela's internal affairs will be serving as a precondition for a possible resumption of political dialogue?
Well, first of all, I think, first of all, the U.S. has been supporting the opposition over the past 10 or 20 years. Secondly, the U.S. has been imposing very heavy economic sanctions against Venezuela. So with this kind of heavy sanctions, the economy in Venezuela is in terrible trouble. Okay, so without economic growth, how can people choose their correct political position? And how can Maduro sit down and have a genuine political talk with the opposition? Or the other way around, with this kind of terrible economy, how could the opposition sit down and have a talk? That's a big problem. So I mentioned 2 problems. I would argue that the external interference is the biggest obstacle for economic and political stability in this beautiful South American country.
Thank you very much for joining us. That was Professor Jiang Shixue joining us from the College of International Relations, Sichuan International Studies University. You're listening to World Today. Stay tuned. You're listening to World Today on Beijing. The new Labour-led British government has revealed that public finances is facing a deficit of £22 billion. That's equivalent to somewhere around $28 billion inherited from the previous administration. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is warning of the difficult decisions remaining ahead in terms of either cut spending or increase taxes. Yan Kopstek has more from London.
the finance minister indicated that this was the worst set of economic circumstances that the country has faced since the Second World War. The Conservative government, the former Conservative Party, immediately rebutted this claim, saying it was actually a shameless attempt for the government to lay the ground for tax rises that would come with the open about in their campaign to win the general election. But recently, the finance minister said it was indeed a cover-up from the opposition on the scale of the whole, $28 billion. So the areas that she outlined that they have not realized the true extent of the crisis were several. They include the asylum system. She said the previous government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda was a significant part of a projected overspend in that area of $8.2 billion. She said rail services and rail use during the pandemic had an influence on the previous government, who had used cash to give rail companies without budgeting properly, taking into account the scales also of industrial action that has been taking place. That led to an overspend of $2 billion. But she said also, she didn't disclose the amount, but that there was an overspend in the amount of money pledged to the crisis in Ukraine. And she said there was, at the moment, not enough money to cover the cost, but that was something that they were willing to honor. These commitments, they will honor them in full. But she said it's going to take them some time to evaluate still before the budget that will be announced on October 30th. But she said it was impossible for this government not to act immediately given the scale of this problem. She said there were many difficult choices that were approaching her on this, spending what she's going to do to plug that hole. The big plan there that has been scrapped is millions of pensioners now are not going to receive a winter fuel payment. That's around $400 a year. She said these are now going to be means tested, which will hopefully save £1.4 billion. That's seen as a surprise news. Another piece of big news that we heard was a deal that they're hoping to strike with the junior doctors. So the junior doctors have been asking for 35% pay rise, and 23% pay rise, and that will be voted on very soon by the union for the junior doctors. The BMA has put that towards their numbers, so that was very interesting.
That was Yen Kopsek reporting from London. So joining us now in the studio is my colleague Liu Kun. Hey, Liu Kun.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, here we are talking about a speech given to the Parliament by Rachel Lee, in which she has detailed about the problem, the system, the solutions possibly. So what do you think is the main message?
So it turns out the Labour government has inherited a huge deficit of £22 billion from the previous Conservative government. Prior to Lee's give speech to the Parliament, her office released a statement on the website detailing all these, where the money is supposed to spend on. And also her decisions, the difficult decisions she said she has to make. These 22 billion of unfunded pledges is what she calls that, include money spent on the Rwanda scheme and also some new medical programs by the previous government. Also, she said the statement that the previous government also failed to increase departmental budgets to cover the public sector pay settlements, which were about 11 to 12 billion higher than accounted for at the last spending review of the British government. And all of these were made on top of pressures resulting from higher inflation, also increased asylum costs, and also funding for Ukraine. As we have already heard from our reporter in London, he has announced a series of measures to cut about £5.5 billion this year, and then another £8 next year. These will include money on consultants and also, this Rwanda scheme, of course. And she also said in a statement to provide certainty for public sector workers that she has accepted some plans or recommendations and confirmed pay uplifts averaging about 5.5% for public service workers in the country.
Yeah. So I'm not sure whether I can call it as a possible austerity measure, but anyway. So in a bigger picture sense, what kind of macroeconomic situation do you think this new Labour-led government is really inheriting from the previous government?
Well, the Labour government over the weekend has already started their assessment, and it's very vivid how they describe this current situation that they are inheriting, which is what they call broke and broken. Pat McFadden, who is a senior member of the new cabinet, said in a statement that, here I quote, "We will not shy away from being honest with the public about the reality of what we have inherited. We're calling time on the false promises that British people have to put up with, and we'll do what it takes to fix Britain." Excuse me. According to UK's National Statistics Office, in the second quarter of this year, Britain's GDP expanded by 0.7% from the previous quarter. And remember that GDP fell for 2 quarters in a row in the second half of 2023. Excuse me. But over the long term, the Bank of England considers robust, or so-called robust 0.76% growth of first half growth this year as likely to be a rebound from last year's weakness in the economy rather than a start of a very good, strong health. And also, the Bank of England thinks that the underlying rate of expansion in the British economy is about 0.25% a quarter. And on top of all of these, we have to remember that Britain has not grown faster than 2% a year on a regular basis since before the 2008 global financial crisis.
So I guess the economy, including the cost of living crisis going on in the UK, are one of the major issues behind the siege suffered by the conservatives, by the Tories. But apart from the economic issues, what kind of are facing this new Labour government as well?
There are sets of social issues. For example, as we already heard from our reporter, there's the problem in the National Health Service. Junior doctors in the country have held strikes constantly over the last 18 months. They demand a pay rise. And these strikes have added to the strain on Britain's health service with, statistics show that the number of people waiting for non-urgent treatment almost doubled to 8 million last year compared to about 4 years ago. And also, I think we have talked about this earlier on the program. UK is running out of cells. The new government will have to grapple with emergency measures in the prison system, maybe release some more early releases. And also, there's also the problem regarding a tech billionaire buying the Royal Mail. That's under discussion as well. So a lot of issues to tackle for the new Labour government.
Yeah, so I guess moving forward, we need to keep observing about what we can really know about the Labour government policy. But thank you very much for joining us today here in our studio. That was my colleague, Liu Kun. That's all the time for this edition of World Today. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on our previous episodes, download our podcast by searching World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.
A political and economic analyst and senior fellow at the Independent Tiger Institute. World Today is news without the hype and business commentary that is informed and up to date, presenting the facts and asking incisive questions. So, join us if you are someone who needs to know what is happening in China as it is happening.
Technology, business, and blockchain. To prepare for the world tomorrow. Join me on World Today.
now the news. I'm Shin Begum. The Communist Party of China leadership has held a meeting to analyze the current economic situation and set out priorities for the second half of the year. General Secretary Xi Jinping of the CPC Central Committee presided over the meeting. The statement released after the meeting says the country sustained the momentum of the economic recovery to move faster to foster new growth drivers. The meeting called for efforts to raise the awareness of risks and maintain confidence in the country's development. Chinese President Xi Jinping congratulated Nicolas Maduro on his re-election as Venezuelan president. President Xi says the two countries are good friends and trust each other and good partners for common development. The president attaches great importance to the development of the China-Venezuela relationship. The president adds that he is Maduro to continue guiding the China-Venezuela all-weather strategic partnership to new heights. Officials say China has recorded an average foreign trade increase of nearly $1.6 billion for a year. Beijing will host a high-level meeting on China-Africa cooperation in just over a month. 2024 Beijing Summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation from September the 4th to the 6th. Summit will focus on joint efforts. People from countries with diplomatic ties with China can visit Thailand properly for 134 hours via tour groups registered in Hong Kong and Macau. State established open ports in the island province of China. Each tour group must consist of at least 2 people, and the entire group must enter and exit together. The National Immigration Administration says it will continue to improve regional visa-free entry policies, further advance the more immigration management system, and warmly welcome foreign nationals to the district. $33 million restricting the agricultural production restoration and 5 flood-stricken provincial areas. The money will be used to manage flood-damaged crops, restore damaged agricultural facilities, and support flood control and drainage of fields. Local authorities have confirmed that at least 7 people were dead and 3 others remain missing after rain-triggered flash floods and mud flows in Hunan province. The dead include 3 villagers from Yongxin County in the central Chinese province. They were killed by mud flow while patrolling in the mountains last week. The other 4 deaths were reported in 4 villages in the city of Zhesheng.